Hi, welcome to the Interverse of Business and Life. This is Barb. Sometimes what we call professionalism is really a mask we've learned to wear, one that protects us, earns approval, helps us feel like we belong. But over time, that same mask can start to feel constricting and limit our expression, our aliveness, or our connection with others. My guest today, Ken De Loreto, knows that journey well. Ken is the founder of Provoke Learning, where for more than 38 years, he's been designing and facilitating transformational learning experiences for leaders and organizations all around the world. In fact, that's how we originally met. Ken was a key part of a team that helped us lead a global initiative around sales. He's also the co-host of the GenX at 60 podcast, which I definitely recommend. In our conversation today, Ken shares honestly about his own evolution from earning the right to reveal himself to beginning from who he truly is. We talk about mask, inner protection, safety, courage, and the intersection between authenticity and professionalism. And we explore what changes in ourselves and in our work when we start leading from presence rather than persona. In this conversation, we invite you along with us to consider where you might still be managing how you're seen and what freedom becomes possible when you let a little more of your true self into the room. As always, I'm so glad you're here. If you know anyone that would benefit from this conversation, please share. Ken, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad you're here.
You have no idea how happy I am to be here with you. You hold such an important part in so many transformational memories for me along my career. So many.
Well, it's very mutual. And you and your partner, Rich, hold like place in my heart around my time in Paris. And, we were laughing the other day that I didn't drink coffee until my 40s until I moved to Paris. And Rich and Ken just really made me realize I cannot live in Paris without coffee. And I'm happy to say, even though I'm back in the States, I'm still very much a coffee lover. Yes. So
Here's what I love about you. So in that moment, here you are, and it was so unfathomable to me that you did not drink coffee at all. And then we are in Paris and it's a cafe culture. You just took right to it. You
I
just took that
did.
cup and you were in.
We got to be open to new experiences.
No,
Yeah,
you
I
were.
couldn't do the cigarettes. I was too much. Like, thankfully, I guess I
That was a
didn't adopt
test.
that. Yeah,
That was a test. And you passed.
yeah. Well, I know that we have a genuine love for development and facilitating other people's growth and development, and I shared in the intro that also we met because we hired you and your organization at the time to train our sales folks.
Yeah.
And so we worked together for a long time. And thankfully, because we traveled to all these different cities together, we had a chance to really get to know one another. So I'm so grateful to have you here because you've been on your own solopreneur journey. You told me the other day, I can't remember for how many years now?
22.
22, which is amazing. That's
I
amazing.
know.
Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I only know that because I had to fill out a form the other day and I had to look back at my organization's founding documents. And I thought 2003? Wait, that's almost 23. So it's been a long time. It's been an interesting journey. I'm happy to talk about anything you want to know and see
Yeah,
what
well, I
comes up.
think we'll go whatever comes up. I trust wherever we want to go, but I want to start with where our conversation took us the other day. I think it's such a relatable idea and something that everyone will relate to, hence why I chose the word relatable. But anyway, I digress. I think this idea, we got into talking about professionalism and mask and persona and how, you know, as we've aged, as we've done this longer and longer, we have both felt the freedom, the liberation, but also the impact in letting some of those old ideas fall away. And so I would love just to dive right in there. And you talked about the idea of mask and professionalism, not only as a protector, but as something you thought was like a good thing inside of
Oh,
an organization. So
I
I'm
thought it
wondering,
made
let's
me a good
start there,
employee.
Ken.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it
yeah,
made me a good employee to take on the clothes, the attitude, the even speech patterns, cadence, and words. And I drank that Kool-Aid full on to be a good representative of my company. What I never thought was happening was that I was losing elements of myself along the way. I didn't see it. And maybe I was even, and I've had to reflect upon this. I don't think it's a maybe. I think I was definitely grateful for the mask to be put
yeah,
on. There were parts of me I didn't want to show. I didn't think were worthy of being in the room with me in a business setting. And so that mask was safe until
yeah,
it became a constraint.
yeah. And what was it like when you say that? What was the mask of professionalism? Like you talk about it in clothes and language, but what did it mean to you at that time?
Well, one of them, which is sort of at a core of just my who I am, was the part of it being gay that had to be ignored. I worked, so this was at the Forum Corporation where you and I first met when I was an employee. I worked in our New York office for 7 years. No one knew that I had a partner.
Mm,
No one knew because I was so stealth, or at least I thought I was,
mhm,
at hiding something that I felt was inappropriate. Now you could put it in parentheses, maybe shameful to share. And I think there were other elements of that. Where I came from was not the right city, the right school, the right et cetera, et cetera. And I spent so much time analyzing what wasn't right that the mask enabled me to just stand up straighter. And so if people would ask me, and this was often the case back then, you meet a new client and they say, "So, Ken, where did you go to school?" That was sort of a
mhm.
first question, and it would send a shock wave through my spine because that was definitely not where I wanted to go. So I learned how to teach our stuff, sell our stuff, talk to clients, ask questions to deflect, but also to diagnose. But,
Yeah.
questions became a really important tool for getting the light off of me and turning it on to them. I think it was only years later that I realized how much I was doing that out of defensiveness. I had one of my colleagues, Melinda, and this was when I moved from the New York office to the Boston office. And I had been there for maybe 3 or 4 months. And I would be doing work with people, but then you hang out with each other. You hang out in the lunchroom, you hang out at the front reception desk. And one day she looked at me and she said, "You're funny." And I said, "Well, I think so." She said, "No, no, I didn't know you were funny." She said, "We've been together here for 4 months. The fact that I didn't know you were funny is not a good thing. It means you've not been showing yourself." And it just sort of hit me that the flip side of the taking on the clothes of professionalism, the allowing myself to wear and speak, the forum way in that regard, and continuing to believe that the rest of myself was not worthy of presenting.
Wow. So would you say like that was the start of you questioning that more deeply and starting to risk sharing more of yourself?
It was always, I thought about this and I've known, and maybe some of your listeners know people who are masterful at continuing the masquerade. They do it really well. It becomes their persona. I mean, you and I, in some of the work we've worked with leaders, for example, who they'll talk to you one way, and then when they get in front of an audience, it's almost like they're a different person, and they're able
Yeah.
to make that and continue that. I realized that I never really let that happen fully. There was a mask, but I always tried to, over time, build trust with a client or a colleague so I could iteratively, slowly reveal more and more of my true self to them to the point where I was as close to being transparent as I felt safe to be.
Mm.
So I never fully hid under a mask, but it was my starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you mean by like that safety? What was at risk in your mind?
Being found out to not belong in the room, being
Mhm.
found out to not have, to being a fraud, to not being someone who graduated from the right school with the right degree program, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a whole host of things. I No one ever told me that. I never had someone point a finger at me and say, "You don't belong." That finger was pointing from inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just, over time, I just became I think I tested not only the waters for my relationships with colleagues and clients, but over time, I tested the relationship with myself. Is it okay? Did the ceiling just cave in because I
Mm.
showed myself to a group of leaders during a workshop? And I saw little by little that no, it didn't. In the beginning, it got cloaked in things like humor. I, through
Yeah.
humor, would show a bit of my true self. My accent from north of Boston would come out, and it would be part of the story I was telling. And they would laugh, and that made me feel safe. And then I would start to reveal more and more. But I realized there was a part of me that was, it's like there were multiple. Do you know Dr. Richard Schwartz's um, internal family system work?
Yes. Yes.
So I think it took me a bit to realize that there were these, and still are, these multiple parts of me. There is this protector who knows how to come into the room, survey and scan,
Yeah.
have conversations that are safe. And then there's sort of my inner child, little Kenny. And little Kenny, if the protector does a good enough job, little Kenny's able to come into the room and have some fun and help the learners have fun because as you and I know, when we're all having fun together, the learning's more profound. Uh, but that it took me a while to realize what was happening. What was surprising to me as I thought about that, Barb, is as much as I thought little Kenny didn't belong in the room, I was still doing what I could do to earn the right to get him to be in the room. And I
Yeah.
don't quite know why, other than believing there was something worthy of him being there.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And, I think all have our own versions of that. The part of us that wants to belong, the part of us that wants to be respected, be seen, be valued, feel like our contribution matters. And really, what you're pointing to are all the extra things we think are needed for that to happen. I've got to speak a certain way, I got to look a certain way, I have to dress a certain way, I have to have a
Hmm.
certain kind of education. And I think that there can be these sort of cultural conditioned ideas also that, obviously support that. And I think what's so amazing about your story, and I'd love to hear, more about this, it's like as you took those small steps, and it's never like linear or all up, it's like this dance, as we all know. But um what started to happen for you internally as you started to let some of those layers and conditioned ideas fall away? That, I mean, obviously, we're having this conversation now because you see quite a distance. Not that you don't have days where a mask looks like a good idea and we do it, but I'm just curious, like, what kept you moving in that direction?
I wish I could name that for you. This is where I still have more reflection to do. I think it was simply it felt better. I know that's, kind of a curt
Yeah.
answer. It felt better. That perfectionism, which was a part of, I don't know whether it's part of my protector or it's a separate entity, this perfectionist,
Yeah.
it was exhausting. So I would have, for instance, before any gig, any delivery of learning for a client, I would have 1, 2, maybe 3 anxiety dreams where what I was doing in the dream was leading the class I was about to lead, and everything was going wrong. And I would
Mm,
wake up panicked and think, okay, it's not happened yet. It's not happened yet. In hindsight, that was my brain trying to prepare me for the worst so I could be prepared for whatever happened. What I should have been able to do, because I was teaching the class in my dream and then in life, is I should have been able to invoice multiple times for that class. But what eventually started happening is I still would have those dreams, and I still do have those dreams, but they're not as, um, there's no panic in them.
yeah,
It's different now. So I think little by little, I just saw that the things that were making me nervous in a session, where right before when we began, I would have to flip an internal switch and the performer would have to come out, that all of
yeah,
a sudden I didn't have to do that anymore.
yeah.
The place where I believe I took the first noticeable step in that transition to reveal more faster, to not go the earn the right route as quickly. Did we do for our work together? Did we do a course on leadership courage?
I don't think so.
So I thought it was you. It's someone else, another client, and there I am. We had designed this new class on leadership courage, not something that existed on the shelf, custom. And I was the pilot facilitator. So now here I am at the pilot. The room is getting filled up with mid-level to senior leaders from the client organization. And the way, and any of you listening in our world will know this, the way you typically introduce yourself at the beginning of a presentation is to state your name, your role, your educational background, your experience, some pithy points that make you worthy of being in front of the room. And that's the way we had always done it. And right before the session, I heard something in my head say, Kenny, interestingly, it said, Kenny, this is about leadership courage. You have to begin this class by demonstrating courage.
Wow.
Okay. I didn't know what that meant. But when the session started and the senior leader kicked off and then transitioned to me, I heard something come out of me that had never come out of me before, and I did not prepare. It was, hi, I'm Ken De Loreto. I'll be your facilitator of this leadership courage. I want you to be comfortable with me for the next 2 days. And since we've not worked together before, rather than me boring you with my life story, which is long and arduous, I want you to ask me any question you want to ask me that's going to help you be comfortable with me. So I'll answer them all authentically. What do you want to know? And they asked me, there was silence, followed by the most beautiful questions that ranged from, where did you go to school? To why do you do what you do? To what gives you joy in life? These
Hmm.
beautiful opening questions. And I just sort of went and answered, and stories unfolded as a part of that. And it immediately connected us, audience and me, together. And what I realized, and this is, by the way I now open every session, every time,
That's
it
great.
has never left me. What happens is I show them it's okay to be um, open. It's okay to be honest. It's okay to be raw. It's okay to not say the right thing. It's okay. Whereas before, I would have stood there and done my, patented robotic introduction
Yeah.
and then said, please ask your questions and share your examples. And how dare I, right? How dare I expect authenticity from them and not have the courage to show it myself? So I love that that moment happened and that it shifted so much. Do you remember Viv Price? Did you work with Viv?
I do. Oh, yes.
So
Yeah.
Viv was in the back of the room. She was
Great.
the designer of this. And after, when we got to break, morning break, she said, Ken, everything's going really well. She's, as you remember, British. Ken, everything's going really well. And just one thing, don't ever introduce yourself that way again. And we talked about it after, and for her, the reaction was it was so dramatically different than what the norm was.
Yeah.
And she was so frightened for me as to
Mm,
what they were going to ask me. I wasn't frightened. but she was frightened for me. And I think,
Yeah.
she became my protector in that moment
Yeah.
because I was
Yeah.
letting down my guard.
What a great story. I know when, I started working with a mentor about 15 years ago, and my mentor at that time, we were started teaching, and they really saw that there was a layer of, you know, George said to me, "You're very approachable and warm, and when you share, like, they get it, like, they're in there with you," and he said, "But there's just this little bit extra that you're
Mm,
doing that has this sort of you're on moment to it." And he shared that around transformational work, he shared that early on when he realized that the work he wanted to do was to create transformation in people, that there was a difference to appealing to the intellect than appealing to kind of getting people in a more reflective internal state to see
mm.
something they haven't seen before. And so he said that he would leave trainings or sessions, and he'd feel good about it. And he said, "Oh, they liked me." And then he had a realization, well, wait a minute. I was funny. I was charming because he is really funny and charming. And he's really smart and, like just an amazing kind of teacher. And he said, so I knew they enjoyed themselves, but I didn't know if they had changed. And so he said, so I had to like just look at where I was leading with performance to try and win them over, right? Versus am I creating a dynamic and an exchange that has people like see something different? And I think your story is such a great illustration of kind of blowing up the model, blowing up the way it's usually done, actually is a perfect place, and having that authenticity and warmth, of course, like that's part of it.
Mm.
So, how would you describe the relationship now between authenticity and professionalism?
Oof, it's such an interesting question. Where my head immediately goes is to, and I've had so many client organizations with this as part of their sort of revitalized culture of asking people to bring their authentic selves to work.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think about what that's actually saying. It's like, if I reflect upon my own journey, Barb, of having to let little Kenny feel safe, having to survey the room, the protector, and then little Kenny can be safe to come and play with the other kids in a workshop, for example.
yeah,
For me to just thrust him on stage and say, "Hey, be authentic, go," would have been awful. That authenticity is earned, I believe. And if the culture and the organization, if the sense of safety isn't around, how are we going to expect people to bring their authentic selves to work? So professionalism becomes the easier answer. Let me adapt. And many of us, it's just sort of built into our wiring. If you
yeah,
adapt to those around you, you have a greater likelihood of surviving because you will be part of a group and resources are more plentiful and support is more available. So why don't you just adapt? I
yeah,
had a session years ago with a financial investment organization, and I was doing a 2-day leadership class, and they were very and are very conservative. That world is very conservative. And so the session ends, everybody packs up. Thanks, Ken. Thank you so much. And they leave except for one participant who's sitting, sort of slowly putting his stuff back in his briefcase. And I said, "Hey, so how was the workshop?" And he said, "Oh, it was great, blah, 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 great." He said, Your shirt." I said, "Yeah." He said, What do you call that?" I said, "Gingham." It was a purple and white gingham shirt. He went, "Wow." He said, "Yeah, here everybody wears white button downs, or if you're feeling, sort of looser, more casual, pale blue Oxfords." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "This is sort of how I dress. This is actually a little more of a toned down version of how I dress." And he said, "And this is where it got weird." He said, "And your pants?" I said, "Yeah." And he's pointing at my middle section. He goes, What do you call that?" And I looked down and I said, flat front pants? And he went, flat front pants. Yeah, there's no pleats. He said, everybody here wears pleats. And I said, well, what do you want to wear? He said, I want to wear what you're wearing, but I never could. I can't. He was so trapped, and I don't know whether it was Barb willingly trapped. If the trap felt safe, I think about I've rescued a lot of dogs, and sometimes when dogs have been abused in the beginning, they need the crate, they need the constraint, the cage to feel safe, and that's so contrary to so many of us as humans. We think freedom is desirable, but not there. And I thought of him in that moment as someone who really needed the cage. And if I had said to him, well, just show up to work and wear those pants and wear a gingham shirt, it would have been
Yeah.
completely the wrong thing for him.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
needed that professionalism. And I don't think those two need to exist exclusively. I think they can merge together. You can be yourself and be professional and push some boundaries if that's your choice. But I don't
Yeah.
think everybody feels safe to do that. And I don't think a lot of organizations give everybody that safety. I mean, what's your perspective on that?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I think the even being authentic and be yourself is in some ways becomes even jargon. But I think you're bringing up a really important point that, in organizations, I think people are hearing more and more like there could good intent, right, to try and say, yeah, be yourself, but there are still these hidden agreements and rules about what's appropriate, what's professional, and so we sort of mean it until we don't, right? And so I think that the other thing I want to say though is being authentic doesn't mean you're just unprofessional.
Uh-uh.
It doesn't mean you're like cray cray or weird or,
Yeah.
it's like, I think that's the other part. It's just what we're kind of pointing to is, am I moving forward in my work in a way that I'm doing a lot of extra management of persona and image? And that takes up bandwidth. It takes up connection. It creates distance between us and other people, as you were sharing earlier. It takes up mental bandwidth because we're constantly wondering where the lines are. We may not just allow a free flowing answer or response because
Uh-uh.
and wisdom and creativity is in the moment. It's in that
Uh-uh.
energy. It's like I worked with this organization once and they hired me initially and they were like, yeah, we're really bad hirers. We don't do a good job and we need people to be more strategic. And it was this group of partners. So I do intake interviews with the team and people throughout the organization. And what I discover is unconsciously, um, they had created this sort of culture, this adversarial culture. So what I was hearing in those interviews was, oh, yeah, no, if I don't, you have to show up and you have to have your ideas thought all the way through. You have to be able to defend them. You have to be able to go to battle with them. I mean, they were using these like words. And the complaint of the partners was, hey, we want them to do their best thinking, but they didn't realize that the way they were showing up to those conversations was completely going against what they were trying to create. And I said, now, do you think that people leave that conversation thinking about their own strategic leadership or thinking, or are they trying to please you the next time so that, it doesn't go as friction, as it was? And so I share that just as an example of like there can be good intent, but we have to explore kind of those hidden assumptions and, unspoken rules in an organization, in a culture. That's one piece. But the other I think is like I'm all those things. Like, I can be funny, but I can be serious. I can be more reserved and then I could be more carefree. I can be really focused and present and I can be so distracted and restless, So I think that this idea of authenticity, what I really hear in the deeper point you mentioned at the start of the call is, can I be me? Like, it doesn't mean I'm always going to be revealing everything about me. Doesn't mean I'll, purposely provoke people, but do I need all that extra around
Mhm.
me?
And then within that, how are people around me going to, are they prepared to take the fullness of me in?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of, trust being in some ways built on consistency of behavior. I know the Barb I'm going to meet when I meet you, Barb. And
Yeah.
if all of a sudden you show up with a different facet of yourself, am I prepared to accept that? Or is it going to feel weird and strange? What's up with Barb? Have you seen her today? Something's not right
Yeah.
because your behavior is out of my norm and my span.
But
So
whose responsibility is that? Do I need to move around worried about that?
I have always, no, not always. I have learned to opt on the side of disclosure about things to help people know who I am, to know what to expect. I remember years ago it started, I think I had just become a manager and we went through this 360 assessment about, our style. It's one of those classic things. And when I got my report, there was one page with my main results and I took it and I taped it to the door of my office because I wanted people to know what they were walking into to increase the likelihood that they were going to understand me and also know how to work well with me. I believe people are not mind readers. At least I haven't met any.
Yeah.
So why am I going to leave that up to chance? The more I can disclose, hey, sometimes I'm really passionate and you're going to see this come out of me. Sometimes I'm more introspective and you're going to see this come out of me. I think the more I help people just relax with me, as opposed to trying to diagnose or get confused by attempting to read my mind. At least that's
Yeah.
been my approach.
Yeah, and I think ultimately the what we transmit is, 95% what's happening inside of us and where we're coming from inside of ourselves versus the words. So I think the more comfortable we are in our skin, as you're saying, the more like whether I choose to be reserved or not, whether I choose to be, gregarious in a moment or not, like all those things, the more we're present, available inside of us, coming from that open space, I think we give other people permission to do the same. And I think you're right. I think that, how can I invite someone to say, you know, it's okay to be you while I'm adding a lot of extra around me to try and come off and appear a certain way.
Yeah.
And I understand the desire for it. And listen, I think we both, just to clarify again, like there's no perfection here. There are times where it still looks smarter to me to do a little persona than the real thing. But ultimately, what I've seen is my ability to build rapport and trust and credibility is absolutely related to me showing up honest, real, present. Not any of that persona stuff doesn't lead, it might reassure them about something, but the trust and the rapport comes from somewhere else.
It's risky though, right? There's risk associated with that. And there's a part of me, and I think this is what took me so long and why I went with this approach of earning the right to reveal myself. I am by nature risk averse. So if I'm going to dare to show the soft underbelly of me to you because I know it's going to help you open up more, I need to make sure it's safe to do that. Those two exist at the same time. So back to sort of these multiple parts of me. The protector has to read the room and make sure that the more vulnerable side can come out and do it in a way. Or as I've learned over time, it's okay to just
Mm.
start there. I'm
Yeah.
fine. I have the skills to be able to improv and work with whatever happens, to be able to either advance from a place where now they feel comfortable with me, or if they don't,
Yeah.
to recover. And I'll be fine and the class will be good. But that realization and that sort of just really letting go is, probably the past maybe 7 years. But before
Yeah.
that it was trial and error. To your point, I was making it sometimes I was putting the performance back on because it felt comfortable. Tell the story you know already because you know it works. Just do it.
Yeah.
And now it's much looser, and I love it.
What do you love about it?
It's to your point about transformation. I get to see people really um, dig into the learning. They're thinking at a deeper level than just let's look at this model on a slide and let's talk through the 5 steps now. Now let's put you in a role play and have you practice the first steps. It's beyond that, where they start to actually internalize. For example, what often happens between day 1 and day 2 now is at least 1 or 2 people in the morning when I say, "So what's sticking with you from yesterday?" At least 1 or 2 people will say, I was so exhausted, but I got home and I couldn't help but talk to my brother, sister, uncle about what we learned. And then we started talking, and they've grabbed it more deeply, not because my organization says I must learn this in order to be effective. That used to be the reason. And that never sat well with me. Like, I don't want them to grab it because their organization is saying they need to or have to. I hate that kind of obligation. I want them to choose it. I want them to grab it. I want them to pull it in places in themselves that I could never push. That's for them to do. So I think it's about transformation. I see them internalizing, interpreting, grabbing, and then using the stuff that we've worked on together more quickly and more profoundly than they did before.
That's my experience too, I think. But I also see it in kind of a relief in all kinds of settings
Mm,
when I just do the best I can in any moment, right? To just show up and get present and human to human, soul to soul with somebody, regardless of the environment.
mm,
It's like I can do that. The trying to come off a certain way, which I obviously, happens, um, is exhausting. I think so often when you talk to people about burnout or feeling uninspired or feeling like they don't fit anymore, if you look, I think there's often a thread there similar to what we've been saying. It's because what isn't fitting isn't it's not about the job. It's the idea we have that we can't be who we are potentially. I mean, sometimes you need to leave, right? It's the job, but in
sure.
a lot of times people don't realize how much they've been showing up with so much that isn't quite them or
Hmm.
uh, uh, not having the freedom to just like be who they are in any given moment, feel that whatever that is. And again, I'm not saying work is a place for therapy. Don't go to the extreme for those listening. But having to live in a place where you feel like you have to constantly prove your worth or have even a little bit of a layer of falseness around you or efforting into some kind of image or persona.
Mm.
I think more and more of us are just tired by all that.
2 things are going through my mind right now. One, the last episode of the podcast I co-host, the guest is a sort of, right in the middle of millennial.
Hmm.
And she has none of what we're talking about. Like, this thought of professionalism and fitting into a system and an institution and then adopting the dress, the talk, all of that in order to be seen as high performing is not something that she was familiar with at all. So my hope is, now there were before I say my hope, there are downsides to the fact that she doesn't have the institution to just slip into.
Yeah.
There's something nice and comforting about that. She has to sort of make it all up as she goes along. At least she believes she does.
Yeah.
But this, there was something beneficial to it as well. I think it's about how long it exists and whether it's actually holding you back. The second
Yeah.
thing, so some work I did with one of my clients for this was, I think, maybe 7 or 8 years. We did this workshop on advanced facilitation skills. And this was for their tenured internal facilitators of technical training, sales skills training, leadership training for their own organization. They had all been through multiple courses on facilitation, and I was brought in to help them go to the next level. So I had to first think, crap, what's the next level? And try to reflect upon my own journey as a facilitator to realizing it's like, wow, what if we could actually teach them to let go? What if we could teach them to show up more fully as themselves in the room, to let go of all the other
Yeah.
restrictions? Never write in a flip chart on a red with a red marker, never stand on the right side of a screen, whatever they had learned. And Barb, it was fantastic, like transformational for these people. Where at the end, well, let me start with the beginning. After we had done this a number of years, I would begin the class by saying, so how many of you know someone who's been through this class? And the hands would go up, and I would say, what have you heard? And they would always say, first thing, people cry. And I said, well, how do you feel about that? That people cry? It's like, well, it's a little worrisome. It's like, let's talk about why they're crying. And what's happening at the end of the class, we would talk about what they're taking away. And I had one participant, I remember him visually. We'll call him Jim. That was his name, Jim. So Jim stood up at the end. You had to say what you learned to the rest of the group. And he started talking. He said, so I'm Jim, and and he got choked up. And everyone in the rest of the group went, ah, because this was the moment where someone was going to cry. Someone grabbed a box of tissues and ah, went toward him, and I sort of gestured, let him be. And he hung until he gained his composure. And he said, I realize how much I've been holding myself back. And I don't know why. No one told me to do it. I told myself to do it. I said, and what do you feel now? And he said, free. And what do you think that's going to do for you in the room? And it's going to be amazing. I've never allowed, this is a tenured professional who had
Yeah.
been going through the motions for all these years. Good morning. My name is Jim. Welcome to, for years, and had never allowed himself to show up in the room. I had another participant of that class, Diane. And the next time I was in the organization, she heard that I was there, and she came in the room at like 7:30 in the morning on the first day. She's like, hi, Ken, do you remember? Hey, Diane, how are you? She said, I just wanted you to know I'm having fun at work. I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean you're having fun at work? She said, I'm having fun at work. I said, what happened? She said, I realized I don't have to hide myself anymore. She had been a professional dancer. She had this whole artistic bent to her. She believed it was inappropriate to show that, let alone integrate it into how she showed up as a full professional in her organization. And so to link all that together, which could never have come from me pushing that into her, that had to be her grabbing it and playing with it internally. To have her actually go from a place where she was thinking of leaving the organization to having, for the first time ever, fun
Mm.
is, one, it's why I love the work that we get to do.
Yeah.
But two, it's both miraculous and really sad, because I know that there are so many that never will get to that point. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful that I get to be a part of it.
Yeah, I so love those stories, and I'm not surprised by them. I think that's the part why I was so interested in exploring this with you, because it's my experience as well that when people that this is ultimately what we crave, connection to ourselves, connection to other people, the freedom to be expressive, to kind of, be who we are, whatever that
To wear flat front
is.
pants.
Yeah, exactly, exactly, and, I think that Brené Brown quote, is such a good one in the sense that we crave belonging, but we try to fit in. And it's
Oh,
just not the same.
no, it's not the same.
Yeah. And often, if you're feeling blah or uninspired or bored, um, I, would love to encourage people to, do what you were just sharing. It's like, are you containing yourself?
Mm.
Are you once I just did a episode where I shared about a realization that I had where I was kind of one step removed from life. I was kind of in my mind a lot, observing, interpreting, not really in it. And so when we allow ourselves to be in it, and part of that is, can I just be myself rather than, trying to be some image I think is needed here.
Especially today, especially in this world of so much curation of how we present ourselves, so much surface, for instance, in social media, and how easy it is to pick and choose the elements that we think are um, desirable
Yeah.
to put forward and then to judge the rest of it.
Yeah.
It's like I spent so much time early in my career judging little Kenny. He's a piece of magic, Barb. He's
Yeah.
fantastic. And I am so glad that along the way I did not kill him. That I think of this thought of protection and a protector, not as being a cage for me, but as like a runway. Like,
Mm,
let the protector allow little Kenny to then just know he can run into the room
mm,
and do great work and help people feel connected and that they can admit vulnerability because he's admitting vulnerability and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if I had not, and this is where I'm so grateful to the fates, if I had not ended up in this career, I don't know if I would have ever gotten to any of these
yeah.
realizations for myself. Like the gift that we get of introspection, which I hear you, sometimes you can get lost in it.
Yeah.
But the gift of it is not what a lot of people have. Most organizations, it's do, 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 go, go, go. There's no
Mm,
time for reflection, let alone introspection.
yeah.
And for some,
Yeah.
it's too painful to do,
Yeah.
and they have no guide. So, how grateful I am for the journey I've gotten to be on with that for
Yeah,
myself.
absolutely. Yeah, same. I feel the exact same way. Ken, I have loved this conversation so much, and as always, love being with you and connecting. I want to just give you an opportunity before we end. Is there anything else that's present or alive that you would like to share?
It's I guess not. I'm going to pull something, but no. I think we've talked about what we need to talk about. I hope that it's resonated in some way for someone. I hope if they disagree, they'll comment and let you know.
Yeah.
So, I'm not speaking from a place of expertise from up on a pillar. I'm speaking from someone who's learning this stuff as he goes. And
Yeah.
it's so much cooler when we can all do that together. So,
Absolutely. I think I've really appreciated your openness, your honesty, your vulnerability. And I think that's it. It's like we're all just doing the best we can every day, right? So if we can take some of those inner constraints away and allow the little Ken or that freedom inside, I think what a great gift. So thank
yeah,
you for inspiring us and thank you for sharing, Ken.
thank you for inviting me to do so. Thank you for being with me.
As always, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean a lot to us if you could take a moment to first subscribe and follow wherever you like to listen to podcasts. Hitting the follow button means you'll never miss a show. All you have to do is hit the plus sign in the upper right-hand corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you like what you're hearing, we'd appreciate you taking a moment to give us a shout out and review. Most importantly, however, if you know anyone that would benefit from this episode, please pass it along. And finally, if you'd like to learn more about my work, Interverse Academy, or upcoming events, you can check out my website at barbarapatterson.com. You'll find some great resources, classes, and videos, and a lot more. Thank you again for being here. See you next time.